I like Kirby Moore's offense for the most part, but I do think it's time for Missouri to pick up some flood insurance. I'll explain coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I want to talk about, well, the play of the game, in my opinion, against Vanderbilt, a play that could end up being the play of the year when you get down to it. I don't know that everybody logged that away in their brains, but I certainly did. So I want to talk about that later in the program. First, I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And on today's program, I want to talk more about the Missouri offense in particular to start the show. And for better or for worse, I've got a lot of statistics here that tell me that the Missouri offense structurally is very much the same that it was last season. Now, when you look at these numbers here from SEC StatCat, in 2023, for example, well, Missouri's three most used offensive concepts, in other words, the three plays that they called most often. Number one, outside zone, 153 times. No shock to any Missouri fans there whatsoever. Second was inside zone read, not too far off with 138. So two running concepts there. First of all, not a huge shock. You're going to see fewer running concepts for most teams than you are passing concepts. That's for darn sure. Well, the third most often used play was a passing concept last season for Missouri. Flood variations is what SEC StatCat calls this. Now, if you want to know what a flood type of play is, just visually picture the Missouri empty five wide receiver offense under Chase Daniel. Picture three receivers to his right, two to his left, and now I want you to picture the three to his right, basically running out breaking routes, and the three to his outside running in breaking routes. Now, that's a little bit simplistic, but that is the general concept of what the flood is. You're having all of your receivers generally run into one area of the field, and basically the idea is to flood, especially a zone coverage. So you're putting more offensive players than they have defenders to cover it. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with a flood concept whatsoever. But if you look at 2024, remember the top three concepts for Missouri last season: outside zone, inside zone read, and flood. Well, what is it this season? It's the exact same three plays in the exact same order of usage: outside zone, inside zone read, and the flood variations. And if you think, well, maybe Missouri was just trying to, keep it vanilla the first 2 weeks of the season, that may well factor into this. Hey, fair point. But here's the thing: against Vanderbilt, well, not only was outside zone the number one play once again against Vanderbilt, and a very effective play at that for the most part, especially outside of the red zones for Missouri. Nate Noel had a huge day. But flood variations was the second most used concept for Missouri against Vanderbilt. 13 play calls. That's a really high number to run one passing concept in one game. So that really stands out to me. Again, nothing wrong with a flood play whatsoever. But the thing is, now after 2023, Kirby Moore's first season with the Tigers, now all of the Missouri opposition, all of our opponents, have had all offseason to prepare for this concept. If anything, I think Missouri should start using these tendencies against the opposition. And by the way, I pointed out that floods, well, they're designed to overwhelm zone coverage. One obvious counter there is, hey, maybe just play more man coverage against Missouri. Maybe that is the concept. Maybe that is the adjustment that a lot of defenses are making. But regardless, I think that while, again, I'm not saying Missouri has to abandon one of its core concepts by any stretch of the imagination, I'll also suggest that stick, its second most used passing concept so far on the season, and it definitely against Vanderbilt last week, well, it has some similarities to the flood concept as well, except the guy most inside, instead of running a flat concept, well, he's going to run a quick little 5-yard, 10-yard hitch route, that type of deal. But still, it's going to be a similar look. I just think at this point, Missouri has to have a little bit more variety with its passing concepts, and even in the running concepts. I think you could argue that a little bit of variety would go a long ways. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm, again, not saying Missouri needs to abandon the outside zone whatsoever. In fact, especially between the 20s, Missouri's been very effective with that play. But again, let's go back to SEC StatCat here, where I'm getting all of these numbers. This offseason, that cat, if you will, he had a piece about which concept every SEC team should run more. Statistically, he thought it was the inside zone switch. And what does that mean? Well, instead of the tight end, blocking essentially the guy in front of him for all intents and purposes in an inside zone, well, instead you're going to switch it. So the tight end goes across the formation and blocks somebody coming the other way. And now the switch part, the linemen then slide over to essentially block the next guy that they would have. That's a concept that Missouri didn't run a ton last season, but ran it effectively on paper. This season so far, according to SEC StatCat, Missouri has not run that particular concept once. So not just in the passing game, but in the running game, it seems like Missouri is really leaning hard into its base concepts that Kirby Moore and his team are most comfortable with. Maybe that makes sense here in September. There's an argument to be made early in the season. Maybe that makes a lot of sense. But as the season goes along here, again, with a full year and full off season of time and film and tape to look at for Missouri's opposition, I think it's time to start branching out a little bit from those core concepts, especially in the passing game, or else I think Missouri does run the risk of being a little bit too predictable, as it looked like they were last week against Vanderbilt, to be brutally honest. And on the positive side of the equation, while a lot of Missouri fans are understandably wringing their hands at the moment after a pretty fortunate victory in a lot of ways over the Commodores on Saturday, the good news is a lot of national people still have the Tigers in the college football playoff. Now, barely in, I'll give you that. In fact, 11 in the country seems to be more or less the consensus for the Tigers right now. 11th in the AP poll. Also, Bill Conley's advanced statistics and projections also has the Tigers at 11th. The Athletic in their 1 through 134 in all of FBS rankings, you guessed it, they have the Tigers 11th in the country. So, yes, well, obviously this national perception isn't going to matter very much if the Tigers lose to Texas A&M and Auburn and South Carolina, whatever it might be. The bottom line is actually this national perception is on our side at the moment. So again, if Missouri goes 10-2, that's the borderline number, right? That we've been talking about all offseason, at least I've been talking about all offseason. That's when the national perception is going to be in Missouri's favor. So at least we need it to be in Missouri's favor. And right now, actually, I think the nation's perception of Missouri is actually better than Missouri fans at the moment. That's a rare moment in time. It certainly is. And I've seen the theory bandied about by some Missouri fans that the new helmet communications are actually causing a communication breakdown for Brady Cook and the Missouri offense so far in this young season. What do I think of that particular theory? Well, I'm going to break it down here for you in just a little bit. But first, it's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android, enter referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Well, this week, I've selected Eddie Kelly because with Missouri leading the game 30-27 in the second overtime, well, we really needed a play from the defense, and Eddie Kelly was exactly that man. Beats the right tackle for a sack on 1st and 10, ultimately leads to Vanderbilt missing that field goal. So if you were impressed as I was with Eddie Kelly's performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy, throw in a few bucks. If everybody pitches in just $10, it adds up very quickly for Eddie Kelly. And you know he could use some support right at this moment. So you have a chance to show your appreciation for Eddie and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to your program. So get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And when you find those right candidates, they truly do feel like part of the team, even sometimes like part of the family. And here's the beauty. LinkedIn isn't just your regular old job board. LinkedIn helps you find and hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively looking at the moment but would be open to the perfect opportunity. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites, so if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now, as many of you have noticed, of course, probably all of you at this point in week 4 of the college season, but a lot of NFL type rules and changes, including the 2-minute warning, aka the 2-minute timeout, and the clock not stopping to move the chains in the first 28 minutes of each half, that type of deal. But one of the notable ones as well, of course, is the helmet communications that's happening in college football right now. The coach can now speak directly to his quarterback and his designated player on defense as well, more often than not, the middle linebacker. And this has caused some Missouri fans to think, you know what? Maybe this whole helmet communications deal is part of the problem for Missouri so far. And certainly there's got to be a bit of a learning curve here. And I've even heard some quarterbacks who have played NFL football say, you know, that change from getting the play in from the sidelines and the signals, maybe the kooky, 4-quadrant poster boards that we've seen, all of that kind of stuff, that versus getting it in through your helmet, hearing that those plays and then relaying it to your teammates, that is a little bit different. It's a bit of an adjustment at the very least, and it's caused some Missouri fans to go, you know what? Maybe this really is part of the problem. I got to say, after watching the Vanderbilt game back, I didn't notice this as much. I didn't watch every single snap from the broadcast. Obviously watched all the snaps from the stands in Faurot Field, but that just didn't stand out to me. I have to admit, I'm not being dismissive of it whatsoever. It's just not something I'm going to definitively say, yep, that's it. This is definitely part of the problem. What I will definitively say, though, is if this is a struggle for Missouri and we're going to change it, if we're going to go back to the signaling it in with hand signals and multiple assistant coaches and decoy coaches signaling in, well, now's the time to do it. With a bye week, now after 4 weeks, if this is truly untenable and you're going to make a move, obviously now is the time to make it. You can't wait until week 8 or 9, whenever the next bye week is, that type of deal. That's not possible. So Interestingly, by the way, I think a lot of people have said, I think some of the reasoning behind bringing the helmet communications to college football was a reaction to the Michigan sign stealing scandal of the previous season. But a lot of people have said, and understandably so to some extent, this is a bit of a half measure. If you're going to go with a full measure, you need to give the helmet communications to everybody on the offense, to every single player, or give them an Apple Watch, that type of deal. Seriously, this is not my idea, although I have one on my wrist right now, but that's one of those ideas that's been bandied about, like, hey, if you're going to put in, hey, flood variation, I'm being sarcastic there, but seriously, outside zone, and then the check is actually to a play action pass of some sort that just pops up on everybody's Apple Watch. Well, you've solved some problems there in terms of sign stealing. That's for darn sure. I think the argument is, hey, well, the quarterback still has to then communicate either with his lips, with signals, one way or the other. That still leaves a little bit of a door ajar for sign stealing, I suppose, stealing the play, that type of deal. But most importantly, from my perspective as a Missouri fan, the reason I'm not totally buying into this idea is I could see where the helmet communication could be a problem in road games. Like, for instance, when Missouri goes to College Station, that is now a bit of a concern for me, or at least something I'm going to be watching. Is Brady Cook going to be putting his hands over his head frequently to hear the sign and all that kind of stuff, to hear the play call, I should say? It's something to watch. It really is. I'm not taking a stance really one way or the other. I'm not saying it definitely isn't a problem. I'm saying it definitely is a problem. I'm just saying it is something to watch, and obviously there's got to be a learning curve there. So one way or the other, let's hope that learning curve has been figured out by College Station, or Missouri could have some trouble with that particular communication breakdown. Now, if you happen to skip my Roy ad read, first of all, shame on you, because that was poetry in motion. But second of all, just in case you did, I did say that Eddie Kelly was the Missouri Player of the Week, and I gave it to him because on 1st and 10 in double overtime, well, Missouri really needed to play defensively. Eddie Kelly came up with it. Makes the sack, gets by the right tackle, just slides right by him. I mean, Diego Pavia had absolutely no chance, even with his mobility, to escape that play. And by the way, then the next snap, it's 2nd and 13. Toriano Pride has excellent coverage on a ball into the end zone to the point where an offensive pass interference is called, making it 2nd and 28. Well, the Commodores pick up some of that yardage, obviously, but ultimately miss the field goal. So I want to give a lot of credit to the Missouri defense and Toriano Pride and Eddie Kelly in particular. Pride, of course, got beat for about a 65-yard touchdown pass before the Commodores' first score there early in the game, just kind of made a false step inside. And that was all she wrote. Pavia threw an absolute dime on that play, by the way. So it was good to see Pride come back and make just an absolutely key play. And Eddie Kelly, a guy who's obviously been through it in the last month or so, lost his mother unexpectedly during this football season. You know what, again, if you can head over to Roy and give some contributions to Eddie Kelly here as the Missouri Player of the Week, at least according to me, I think that'd be a pretty good karma move, in my humble opinion. And coming up with the Tigers on a bye week, I thought it'd be a good time to update on how the former Missouri Tigers are doing in the NFL, including not one, but two significant updates on Tyler Badie / Badie. I don't know. Let's talk about that one here coming up in just a second. But first, I want to talk about FanDuel because, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's called convenience, ladies and gentlemen. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And I'll just say, don't bet on the Chiefs this week. It seems like a trap. That's my one bit of advice there. But regardless, you got to visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, Tyler Badie, now of the Denver Broncos, one of my personal favorite Tigers, certainly of recent years. Just a great personality, super likable guy is Tyler Badie. But he's, struggled really the last couple years to find any traction in the NFL. And this past Sunday was by far his biggest game as a pro. He hasn't been active a ton in his career, but was very much active, and so active, in fact, he led the Broncos backfield in carries this past weekend, in touches too, quite honestly. 9 carries for 70 yards for Tyler Badie, including a big explosive 43-yard run against Tampa Bay in a big Broncos victory this past weekend. So Denver picking up its first victory, by the way, with Tyler Badie helping lead the way. Sure seems like the consensus is he's earned an opportunity at more action, if not maybe the absolute bell cow lead back for Denver. I'm not going that far or anything, but certainly Badie has earned himself some more opportunities after last week. Now, by the way, there was some interesting, speaking of, you can tell the NFL beat and the Broncos haven't talked a whole lot to Tyler Badie so far in his career, because he said, well, you know what? Actually, my name is actually pronounced more like Bidet. Huh? Excuse me? What? I'm sorry, Tyler. You know I love you, buddy, but after 4, 5, 6 years, you're going to give me this update? Way to leave me hanging and make me look stupid. I think at this point, I think I'm still sticking with Badie. I got to be honest. Remember when Travis Kelce said a couple years ago that, actually it's pronounced Kels, and we all collectively decided, too late, Travis. Too late. But no, actually, I think that was more of, hey, I think it was originally Kels, but it became Kelsey, as a lot of American names get Americanized over the years, that type of deal. But you know what? Some other updates on NFL players for the Tigers. I'll just say this rookie class so far for Missouri, off to a rather slow start. So slow, in fact, that most of these guys haven't even played yet. Actually, it's Jalen Carlies, by the way, who's had by far the most action on this young season with 61 snaps in 3 games. Second is Ennis Rakestraw for the Detroit Lions with just 3 snaps on the season, though, all of them coming in week 1. Chris Abrams-Drain, Cody Schrader, Tyron Hopper, and the injured first-round pick Darius Robinson do not have a snap recorded yet in this young NFL season. So just 3 weeks deep there, not writing anybody off whatsoever. Obviously, I think a lot of NFL fans feel quite a bit different about the quarterback Jaden Daniels for Washington, the former LSU product, after last night's game compared to a week or 2 ago. So just pointing out that, yep, it's tough out there for rookies in the NFL. I'm a little bit surprised that Rakestraw hasn't played more, but that's a pretty strong Detroit Lions team who's trying to win some ball games. So, again, J.C. Carlies, surprisingly, by far the leader in snaps so far among that rookie class with 61. And finally, when it comes to the uniforms, can I just say, by the way, I was much more focused on the football from Saturday, but those uniforms sucked. Let's be real. Enough with the Oregon cosplay, quite honestly. Can we just look like Missouri? Listen, I don't mind changing stuff up every once in a while. I don't mind changing between the oval tiger and the block M, mix it up a little bit, but I don't know, yellow on white? What are we doing here? Gold would be probably a kind way to describe that particular shade. But regardless, can we just burn the gold tops forever? Can we just stick with white on the road, black at home? Because I don't know that I ever remember Missouri ever playing well in gold uniforms, to be perfectly honest with you. Maybe somebody can come up with an example, but to be perfectly honest, the 2008 Kansas game is forever burned deep into the gray matter of my brain. But one thing that was positive from this past weekend, I will say the fan experience, hey, at least the sound was better. Not saying it was perfect, but it was a heck of a lot better than it was in week 3 in that sound mixing abomination against Boston College. But hey, hopefully this hasn't been an assault on your eardrums. That is this episode of Locked On Mizzou. Thanks for joining me here as always. And until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.